The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the snow-covered landscape. The air was crisp, but the sounds of laughter and joy echoed through the courtyard of the orphanage. Children, bundled in thick scarves and mittens, played in the snow, their giggles blending with the crunch of frost beneath their boots. A fire crackled inside the small building, offering a flicker of warmth against the cold. It was here, in this tranquil scene, that Barron Trump arrived, a quiet figure against the backdrop of innocence and hope. The children paused their play as they noticed him, gathering around with wide, curious eyes. Barron's smile was gentle, his gaze soft as he greeted them. Each child introduced themselves, sharing brief stories of their lives before the orphanage. Some spoke of loss, others of uncertainty, but in every word, there was a deep yearning for something more: a family, a home. Lila, a small girl with bright eyes and messy curls, stepped forward hesitantly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, her words weighted with unspoken pain. "Will you stay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Barron nodded gently, promising them his time. Little did he know, this quiet day would lead to an unexpected journey of kindness and connection. A journey that would change them all. Barron stepped into the warm glow of the orphanage, his footsteps slow and deliberate on the wooden floor. The children gathered around him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hope. He exchanged smiles with each one, his presence soothing, yet unfamiliar in its quiet authority. There was a calmness to his demeanor, a careful distance, but beneath it lay something genuine, a desire to understand. Lila took a seat by his side, her small hand resting lightly on her lap. Her earlier question echoed in her mind. "Will you stay?" It hung in the air, waiting for an answer she hoped he would give. The other children watched quietly, their eyes searching his expression for a glimpse of assurance. "How long will you be here?" a boy named Ion finally asked, his voice soft, yet full of longing. Barron paused, his gaze sweeping over the group before speaking. "As long as you need me," he said gently. The children exchanged glances, their faces showing a flicker of relief. For the first time that day, a warmth filled the room. Not the kind from the fire, but from connection. Each child felt seen, heard, even if just for a moment. And as the sun dipped lower, painting shadows on the walls, Barron began to understand the depth of what these children had lost, and the small glimmers of hope they held onto. As the evening settled over the orphanage, the children huddled close to the fire, their voices weaving together stories of past and dreams of the future. Barron sat quietly, listening to their tales of loss and longing. Lila sat beside him, her small hands resting on her lap as she spoke about her family. Parents who had once held her close, now gone without a trace. Her voice was steady, but her eyes reflected a deep ache, one that no child should carry alone. "Ion wants to be a doctor," Lila said, glancing at the boy who shyly smiled, his face flushed from the warmth of the fire. "He says he wants to heal people." Ion nodded, his expression serious yet hopeful. "Maybe someday," he added softly. "Razia wants to be a teacher." Another child, Zara, chimed in. "She says she'll teach kids who can't afford school." The other children murmured in agreement, each sharing dreams that seemed small yet immeasurably powerful. Barron watched them, his silence not discomforting, but thoughtful. Their words painted vivid images in his mind, visions of a future where children like these could find their place in the world, even if it wasn't the one they had hoped for. There was a weight in their hopes, a reminder of what was taken from them and what they still dared to hold on to. "You all dream so big," Barron said softly, his voice breaking the quiet hum of the room. "What else do you hope for?" The children paused, searching for the right words, their expressions a mixture of vulnerability and determination. Lila's voice broke the silence again. "We just want someone to stay," she said quietly, looking up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. Barron's heart tightened. It was not an impossible request, but the enormity of it weighed heavily on him. Still, he felt something shifting, something real, a bond forming between their unspoken needs and his desire to offer something more than just his presence. The room was quiet, save for the crackling fire and the soft rustle of children shifting closer to Barron. Lila's gaze stayed fixed on him, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. She took a deep breath, as if mustering the courage to speak. "There's something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Barron tilted his head slightly, waiting. "What is it, Lila?" he asked gently, sensing the gravity in her words. She hesitated, her small fingers fiddling with the hem of her dress. "It's just $1. $1, she said finally. The simplicity of the request seemed almost absurd, yet the weight of it was undeniable. "Ion, he wants a scarf. It's cold outside. He doesn't have one." Her voice wavered, as though explaining such a small amount of money held the key to something much larger. Barron's brow furrowed in thought. $1? He glanced around at the children, their hopeful expressions echoing Lila's plea. It seemed impossibly small, a gesture so insignificant in his world, yet here in the quiet of the orphanage it felt monumental. "Why a scarf?" Barron asked quietly, unsure of what he was truly asking. Lila's eyes glistened in the dim light, her voice steady once more. "Because it's more than just keeping him warm," she said softly. "It's the warmth of knowing someone cares enough to do something." The room was still. The weight of her words hung in the air. Barron understood then that this wasn't just about the scarf. It was about connection, about seeing beyond the surface and offering something small but meaningful. A token of compassion in a world where so much was stripped away. He nodded slowly, the smallest of smiles crossing his face. "All right," he said simply. "Let's find a scarf." As they walked through the village market, the cold air bit at Barron's skin, but the warmth from the children beside him kept the chill at bay. Lila held tightly to his hand, her small fingers wrapped around his with an unwavering trust. The vibrant stalls around them bustled with life, vendors calling out to customers, the hum of conversation blending into the atmosphere. Barron couldn't shake the weight of Lila's words. A scarf, such a simple request, yet it stirred something deep within him. He thought back to his own life, filled with abundance and choices. $1 meant little to him, but here it meant everything to Ion. Barron's brow furrowed as he tried to understand how something so small could carry such significance. He paused for a moment, watching the children's excited faces. They moved from stall to stall, their eyes wide with wonder at the simple trinkets and goods offered by the vendors. But Lila's quiet gaze was always on him, her unspoken plea still ringing in his ears. "What if it's not enough?" Barron asked, his voice barely audible over the market's noise. Lila stopped and looked up at him with those same hopeful yet determined eyes. "It's enough," she said firmly. "It will always be enough if it comes from you." Barron's heart clenched at her words. He understood now this wasn't about money. It was about the intent behind the gesture, the recognition that even the smallest acts could carry immense weight when rooted in compassion. "Let's find the perfect one," Barron said, his voice steady now. Together, they continued through the market, each step reaffirming the bond between them. A bond forged not by circumstance, but by a shared understanding that even in moments of simplicity, kindness has the power to heal. The market was alive with color and noise, vendors shouting, laughter echoing, and the scent of fresh bread and spices filling the air. Barron and Lila weaved through the crowd, their steps purposeful but careful, as if navigating a world far removed from their own. The children rushed from stall to stall, their excitement contagious, while Barron watched them with a quiet understanding. Lila stopped at a stall where scarves hung in a variety of colors, some plain, others adorned with intricate stitching. She let go of Barron's hand and carefully picked up a soft, deep blue scarf. Her small fingers brushed the fabric as she turned to him, her face lit with determination. "This one," she said softly, holding the scarf up for his approval. Barron looked down at her, his gaze meeting hers. He felt the weight of her choice. A simple gesture, yet so significant. Ion would wear this scarf, but it wasn't just about warmth anymore. It was about hope, comfort, and knowing someone thought of him. "Are you sure?" Barron asked gently, wondering if such a small gesture would truly make a difference. Lila nodded firmly. "It's perfect," she said with a quiet confidence. "He'll love it." Barron paid for the scarf, his hand briefly brushing against Lila's as they exchanged a quiet moment of understanding. The market continued to buzz around them, but for a moment, it felt as though time itself had slowed. The weight of their shared mission, the desire to bring warmth and kindness, transcended the noise and distractions of the world. They moved forward together, their bond stronger now, deeper. The simple act of choosing a scarf had become more than a gesture. It had become a promise. And in that promise, Barron realized the true power of compassion. That even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple through lives, touching hearts in ways words could never fully express. That evening, back at the orphanage, Ion sat by the fire, his small hands cupped around a warm cup of tea. The scarf hung gently over his lap, its soft fabric a comforting presence. The children gathered around him, their faces glowing with warmth as they listened to Barron tell stories of his own childhood. "It's beautiful," Ion whispered, running his fingers across the stitches, tracing the intricate patterns Lila had chosen. The smile that stretched across his face was genuine, full of gratitude. "Thank you." Barron sat quietly beside him, watching as the room filled with contentment. The fire flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, but the warmth they felt wasn't just from the flames. It was in the room's collective joy, in the simple gesture of giving and receiving kindness. Lila watched from across the room, her small frame radiating a quiet pride. She had picked the perfect scarf, not just for its color or texture, but for what it symbolized. It was more than protection from the cold. It was a reminder that someone cared. For Ion, who had been alone for so long, this gesture was a lifeline, a connection to something greater than himself. Barron noticed the way Lila's gaze never wavered, how her presence seemed to anchor the room, grounding it in something real. Her quiet strength had guided him through the unfamiliar territory of selflessness, teaching him that sometimes the smallest gifts leave the largest marks. "We'll make sure he never feels cold again," Barron said softly, his voice breaking the stillness. The room nodded in agreement, their hearts entwined in a shared purpose. The bond they had forged that day wasn't fragile. It was unbreakable, rooted in a deeper understanding of love and compassion. As the night deepened, the children's laughter filled the space, warm and sincere. And in that moment, Barron knew the real magic wasn't just in the scarf. It was in the hope that had blossomed from a simple act of kindness. As the fire burned low, casting long shadows across the room, Barron sat quietly, lost in thought. The children had settled down, their faces soft with contentment, yet the quiet hum of gratitude lingered in the air. He glanced at Ion, who now held the scarf protectively, as if it were more than just fabric. It was a symbol of warmth and belonging. Barron's mind drifted to the day's events, replaying every moment. The simple request for $1 had led to something far greater, a bond forged through shared vulnerability and the power of giving. He thought about how effortlessly the children had opened up, sharing dreams and fears without hesitation, and how that trust had pulled him into a world far removed from his own. "Kindness?" Barron whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. "It's something you give, but it gives back more." He watched Lila as she helped Ion adjust the scarf around his shoulders, her smile radiant in the dim light. Her presence reminded him that even small gestures could create profound change when they were rooted in genuine care. The weight of his thoughts settled deep within him. He realized how easily he had taken things for granted, his world of privilege and certainty contrasting starkly with the children's reality. Yet, instead of feeling guilt, there was a quiet resolve forming inside him, a commitment to be more present, more aware of the power in simple acts. "Never underestimate the impact of something small," Barron murmured to himself, his voice steady now. The children's laughter echoed softly in the background, their joy contagious. In that moment, Barron felt his heart expand, just as much as theirs had. They had taught him more than he could have ever imagined. And as he sat there, a quiet promise took root, a promise to continue walking this path of kindness, one step at a time. The following days at the orphanage passed quietly, but the bond between Barron and the children grew stronger with each passing moment. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet conversations by the fire. Barron found himself drawn to their simple yet profound perspectives on life, perspectives shaped by loss, but strengthened by hope. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a warm, amber glow, Barron sat with the children once again. Lila leaned against his side, her head resting gently on his shoulder. She spoke softly about her dreams, about how she wanted to create a world where no child felt alone, a world where kindness was the most powerful force. Ion sat across from them, twirling the scarf between his fingers. "It's more than a scarf," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's a reminder that someone cared enough to give it to me. That's what really matters." Barron listened carefully, his heart heavy with emotion. The children's words had a profound impact on him. They had taught him that what seemed small, a gesture of compassion, a shared moment, could resonate deeply, becoming a part of someone's soul. Their vulnerability, their hope, became his guide in understanding the world in a way he hadn't before. "You've all shown me the true meaning of giving," Barron said softly, his voice steady. "It's not just about the act itself. It's about what it represents, the connection it builds between us." The children nodded in agreement, their eyes shining with understanding. The room felt lighter, filled with a sense of purpose that hadn't existed before. In that quiet moment, Barron knew that their bond wasn't temporary. It was permanent. They had created something that transcended the boundaries of age and circumstance, a shared space where empathy and kindness thrived. As they sat together in the stillness, Barron felt the weight of his own transformation. The orphanage had become more than a place of refuge. It had become a home, a place where hearts were healed and relationships forged in compassion would last a lifetime. As the sun rose on the final day of his visit, Barron stood by the window of the orphanage, watching the children play outside. The air was crisp, but the warmth of their laughter filled the courtyard. He thought back to the days they had spent together, the shared moments, the stories, and the quiet understanding that had grown between them. Lila approached him quietly, her hand holding the small, weathered notebook she always carried. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice soft but hopeful. Barron's heart tightened as he knelt down to her level. "I promise," he said with a gentle smile. "I'll come back, not just for a visit, but to be here, to listen, to learn, and to be part of your lives." Tears shimmered in Lila's eyes as she hugged him tightly. The children gathered around, their faces bright with anticipation, their trust in him unwavering. Barron felt a deep sense of responsibility settle within him. These children had given him more than a chance to help. They had given him a purpose. "Together," Barron continued, his voice steady, "we'll make sure no child here feels forgotten or alone." The children nodded, their small hands squeezing his in agreement. The bond they had built was unbreakable, a foundation of hope, resilience, and love. Barron knew that his journey with them had only just begun, and this promise was more than a commitment. It was a shared vision for a future where kindness and compassion would always prevail. As he stepped outside into the crisp morning light, the orphanage seemed quieter, yet more alive than ever. The laughter, the tears, and the simple moments of connection echoed in his heart, leaving behind a legacy of shared humanity that would endure long after he left. And with that, Barron turned to face a future where he would return, again and again, to a place where the most profound acts of kindness began with a single promise.